Angela Cox, thank you so much for joining us on Undistracted. I really appreciate it.
I'm happy to join you.
Your job is one that, of course, we all get to watch you do, but it's also quite a very full, very intense one, being a journalist and bringing the news to us. What actually kicked off your interest in news and journalism back in the early days?
I think I used to sit there watching Yarn Event, showing my age now, when I was a kid, because that was like Sunday night viewing at the time. I was quite inspired by these people who travelled the world and looked at, issues happening around the world, because obviously back then, I guess we weren't as mobile as we are now. And so that kind of started something. I don't really know where it came from, but I do remember my granddad used to live on our property. He had a little caravan out the back behind our house. And I would go up there, he would make me fruit cup cordial and give me ginger nut biscuits. And I would go up there, I must have been about 6, and I would have this old tape recorder and I would press record and essentially interview him. Obviously at the time, I didn't know that's what I was doing, but I was asking him about his life and all this sort of life stories. And I don't know, so I guess it's just something innate. And then when I was probably about 10, I think, I've got a twin sister and she learned to ride a bike than most, and our neighbours were really fancy and they had an old Beta video recorder, a camera, and I stood in front of the camera and I was essentially doing like a piece of camera recording on the fact that my sister could ride a bike finally at the age of 10, like 3 years before the rest of us. So I don't really know, like I didn't remember really wanting to be a journo, but I was being a journo from such a young age. I just always liked, like I'm quite a communicator. I love a chat. I love hearing people. I'm curious about people. And so I think that all just kind of rolled in together. Initially, I wanted to be a print journo. I wanted to edit women's magazines. I couldn't get work experience in any print format, and I ended up getting experience in TV. And then as soon as I walked into a television station and went out on the road, for my first time, I must have been 18 or 19 studying at uni, and I was just sold. And then from there, I was just like, yep, this is it. And, I've just had the most wonderful, remarkable career, as in, for me personally, like satisfying. And mostly being over in the US, being a foreign correspondent and getting to cover a lot of different things around the world.
Yeah.
Pretty much lived up to what I was hoping for.
Yeah, and that's good. It's good when our dreams actually meet a level of our expectations. And in the stories that you get to tell, like you say, you're meeting new people, you're bringing their kind of stories to life, and particularly in the US as well, covering so many significant news events. Why is it important to you to be able to tell someone's story and highlight some of those things?
Well, it just goes back to the basic thing of giving a voice to people who are voiceless. And it sounds quite sort of trite and, make it sound as though we think we're more important than we are. But I'm really passionate about how important that is. I'm passionate about, obviously, I love working for Channel 7. I've worked for Channel 7 my whole life, but I'm passionate about the public broadcaster. It's important that we have a healthy media. If one of our opponents starts cutting back staff or getting rid of news programs, that's the worst thing we need. We need a healthy, robust media. We need to, and sometimes we do, like as an industry, this isn't just us, but as an industry, sometimes we get a bit too caught up in what the media thinks is important, or what the Twitter sphere thinks is important, or if we're in Canberra, what the politicians are talking about. And it is the thing I hate most. Like, it's always about, we just had recent flood coverage. Obviously, it's been awful, the floods that have affected people. And what I come into, less experienced producers who are putting together our shows, is like, it's great to have the SCS experts, it's great to have the Weather Bureau, it's great to have the politicians, but where are the people? I want to hear from the people about this story, because they're the ones that are being affected by it. We're supposed to be the mouthpiece for the people, and we have to be very careful about that. Not to say that we have to censor anything or anything like that, but we have to be smart, and we have to not just let anyone talk anything that's not true and put that all over TV. But we have to be really responsible, and we have to try and listen to as many people as possible and talk to as many people as possible. When you're out on the road and you talk to as many people about their experiences, and you learn so much. The amount of times you do an interview with someone and you stop the interview and you're getting a few shots afterwards, and then they say something, makes your mouth drop to the floor, and you're like, oh my God, I didn't know that was a thing. Let's talk about this. And you have to start filming again. But there's a bit of humility I think you have to have in our industry, where you have to be wise enough to know that you don't know everything, and that people don't go to university, they don't have to be an expert, they don't have to be a specialist. There are people who know more about things than you do. Your job is to listen to them and to ask the right questions and to get them comfortable enough to talk to you and trust you enough to talk to you and share their story. But most people generally want to share stuff. Sometimes they don't, and that's really difficult. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's really important that we give people a mouthpiece who want it. I also think it's important that we, keep the bastards honest, as they say.
Yeah, I think all of us value someone listening and just hearing us out, which is one of the most powerful things, particularly in recent coverage of floods or whatever natural disaster it might be. You always can just see on the faces of the people, the everyday people that live in these areas, how much it means to them to be heard. But in hearing you speak about the way you want to do that, I can just hear such passion, and that you come into media with a real vision for it. It's not just a job for you, it would seem. For most of the people that you meet in your industry, do you feel like that's the same? Do they have that same kind of intentional approach?
Yeah, I have to say, by and large, I think most people who get into our business, it's like they want to do better. They want the world to be a better place. They want to, not everyone, of course, there are going to be the egomaniacs who are just doing it to try and be on TV. But I kind of do get a little bit annoyed when people have a crack. Like, there's a lot of conspiracy theories that we're just like, especially with coronavirus and the vaccines. I know it's very confronting and confusing, and there's a lot of division about it, but you get all this flack on social media from people saying you're just a shill for the government, and from big pharma. And it's like, if you have a legitimate disagreement with what's being reported, I'm all about it. I'm like, the only way to get better is by listening to people. But this cynicism and conspiracy theory that journalists are just trying to say what the government wants them to say, or big pharma wants them to say, that's just not indicative of, certainly not me, but most of the people I work with. We're trying to be honest, give information that's balanced and unbiased. And we all got into this I've never had a boss come up to me and say, you need to change that because my mate's this person and you need this message to come across. Maybe some people do that, but I've never seen that in my experience in newsrooms. I think the vast majority of us try and be we don't always get it right. Don't get me wrong. And it's important to own your mistakes. And there's stuff that, even in my own career, there have been things I've done that I'm like, look back on and go, I wish I'd handled that differently. Like I said, it's about wisdom and humility to be able to acknowledge that, because otherwise you don't learn from it and fix it. But I think on the whole, most journos and producers and, cameramen, like the amount of people that are behind the scenes that you don't see, like, I think they're all invested in trying to share people's stories and for the right reason.
How do you filter then between what stories to tell and what ones to leave behind? And I think even it's the basics of journalism, but I think for a lot of people watching, knowing how to tell if something is true and is genuine, or whether it really just needs to be left, at the wayside, how do you make that filter to distinguish between truth, fact and fiction, and what to air and not to air?
It's getting harder and harder with social media, because now so many people can put anything to social media and there's no filter. We would sit here traditionally, and I remember when 9/11 happened and when the Bali bombings happened and things like that, you would look at pictures coming in and they'd be so horrific that you'd be like, that's too much. People don't need to see that. It would make you physically sick having to look at it. And so you use a bit of judgment, whereas nowadays everything goes on. Mass shootings are live streamed on social media. So it's then also people's, ideas. It's very hard because you don't want to censor. I'm all about freedom of speech and not censoring things. But where you had really experienced journalists and producers who've heard both sides of arguments, or many sides of arguments, and trying to, and that's what makes us trustworthy. You know someone, you go, they're telling me the truth because I know last time they were balanced with this. Hopefully you get that over a number of decades and people learn to trust you. But it is really difficult. You just have to, and we've learned all the hard way that you have to verify things. You have to wait. You can't, just because it hits Twitter. I did Boston bombings, and every network in Australia and the online sites all named the wrong person and didn't say this person did it. like I reported, there are reports in the US or online that this is a person that FBI wanting to talk to. Other people went a bit harder and said this was the person responsible, but everyone named him. And it was because it was the middle of the night in America. So there were no other like NBC, all your big names that would have been onto it, verifying it from their FBI contacts. It was middle of the night. It hit social media on Reddit, and then it went to Twitter. And then in Australia is running it. Turned out we woke up the next day and it wasn't that guy. He'd committed suicide in the river.
Wow.
That is the sort of thing. And we all across the board learned a valuable lesson from that, because you can't, and it's very tempting in the industry we are now, because it's all about who's first and who's this. No, it's not. It's about who's right. You have to earn trust. But that is something that everyone kind of went, okay, we all need to just take a step back. Just because it's on Twitter doesn't mean it's real. And but every day, I mean, not every day, but we're often sitting here, we have to double check everything. We don't go now and like we've got the police verifying or family verifying it, but it is challenging because there's a lot more stuff out there. Sure.
And there's a lot of power in what you're choosing to report, whether it's something like that in, getting someone's identity incorrect, or even just in the ideas that media shape and the conversations we start to have. I think of things like Me Too and all of these things where media is part of a conversation. How do you deal with that responsibility? And I suppose the influence that you actually do carry being part of an influential media organization?
Yeah, it is. It is tricky, and there are some issues that you think should be covered more, but then the vast majority of people in Australia who have remote controls aren't interested in those same issues, even if you think they're really important issues and you want to get it across. If you give it lots of coverage, everyone's going to switch off or go to another network. That's actually just the reality of it, which is why it is always important to have, in my opinion, nationally funded broadcasters like the BBC. My partner's English, and he's always whinging about the TV license tax that they have in the UK. That TV license pays for the BBC. And we've had so many arguments that he's now come over to my side. I'm like, that is the one tax I would pay, because it is so important not to have an underfunded national broadcaster, because then stories that don't get the attention that they probably deserve in some of the commercial networks, because they're commercial businesses. You have to make keep doing stuff and putting money into things that don't make money anymore, because they're committed to news. So I don't want to be disrespectful to commercial networks, but the reality is you need a strong, healthy, nationally funded broadcaster to be able to give adequate coverage for things that don't get as much coverage as they should be in some of these networks. But for us, we just have to, if we believe in a story, just have to keep pushing it. And, but it is hard. I mean, because also, you can hear how much I can talk. Like, you can spend so much time talking about something, and then people are sitting at home, half of them like, oh my God, they're still rabbiting on about this. I want to hear, had the Ukraine war start, and then we had the floods at the same time. It's like, I was hosting Weekend Sunrise that day. We're trying to do coverage on both, because both are so important. Obviously, local people are more affected. This was when it was in Queensland, southeast Queensland, by the floods. They needed immediacy and urgent stuff. Also, Ukraine, that's pretty serious, and Russia, and this is going to be another third world war. But then, you can't win, because then people are writing in saying, why are they talking about the war in Ukraine? We don't care. We want to know about the floods. And why are they talking about the floods? It doesn't affect me. It's very difficult balance, and all we can do is try and do the right thing. But it is hard.
And it's hard being not only someone who is aware of all of that news, as all of us are, and we're kind of like immersed in it, but then to be reporting it and living essentially in a 24-hour news cycle. Are there things that you do personally to look after yourself, to just make sure that your own headspace is okay, given all of these things that are happening around us?
Yes, I've definitely learned self-care since I got back from the States. I didn't have a lot of self-care over there because it's a very hectic job, and if I ended up, I think, I developed some autoimmune issues and stuff like that after that, I was like, I think this is your body saying you need to have rest. And so I've made it a really, conscious effort of giving myself self-care time. And I'll go swimming is my thing in the ocean. So every morning when it's when I don't have to be in here at 4:00 in the morning or something, I'll go, and that's my 5 or 10 minutes where I'm just all in the present, being grateful for the oceans and the world and what we can, and just really practice gratitude, practice, clearing my head. But we do, I think all journos and producers, by and large, you do have to have some level of filter in terms of, because, most stories are going to bring you to your knees if you let them. There's so much, like this maternity hospital getting shelled, people's livelihoods being destroyed for the second time around in Lismore. Like, I started crying on air because of a dog got rescued that was missing and was reunited, and you well up, because if you're a human and if you're empathetic and you care about people, which most journos do, because that's why we do it, you get emotional about it, and you have to but there has to be a level of professionalism, because people don't want to turn on the news and have some crying maniac getting all hysterical. They need calmness, and so you do have to kind of switch over to your professional side. But when big stories happen and big disasters, and you're actually in disaster zones, or you're in the middle of a terror attack, or you're in those situations, when you leave, there is a bit of time when you have to process everything. And especially if you're in a dangerous situation, you kind of don't think about it until you leave, because when you're there, you're just about getting everything you need for the story. So you have to do a bit of self-care. I mean, they do have, Channel 7 has mental health, you can go and see a psychiatrist, which I've actually used. A year or two ago, my mum got really ill, and I was doing all of that with work stuff, and so I'm kind of not coping at the moment. I'm just not coping, but I'm doing it tough, and I could be doing. And they put me onto this therapist. I went and saw the therapist 3 times, talked it all through, all confidential, so that, didn't come back to Channel 7 or anything, but it was really valuable. And now I'm very big. If I catch, and I'm also very much aware of this stuff, so I look out for the younger producers. If I see they're not coping or something's tough, I'll be pull them aside. How you doing? Do we need to have a chat? And try not to make it too serious, but just let them know if you need to have a chat, and then if you need a serious chat, Channel 7 offers this, so make sure you use it. Ashamed, I've done it, a lot of people have done it. If you need it, take. And so I think we're quite supported here, which I think is important, because we do stuff that's pretty, awful sometimes.
Yeah, you got to be available for people, and it's kind of like the news is impacting your own life, as you say. Your mum was super unwell, and because of COVID, you've got that distance. You're not necessarily able to see her and connect. But is she doing all right now? You've been able to make contact again?
Well, yes. So part of it was she was being diagnosed with a quite awful it was breast cancer, but it went to the brain. So she had brain tumors, had them cut out. Then she was diagnosed with something that she was only supposed to live a few weeks. That was years ago. So she's actually doing remarkably well. The difficulty was she was in Queensland. I couldn't get up to see her because of the border closures. So then I had to move her down at the beginning of last year to a nursing home here. And then, of course, 2 months later, 3 months later, we had Barbecue Man, and then they shut down so then it was very hard, because my twin sister's in Queensland, so they couldn't get in. My brother's in the US, so he couldn't get in. And then I couldn't even see her a lot of the time. And she's classified as, it's terminal. So it's obviously every day is important, and trying keeping her up. But it was also a real leveler. I don't want to sound like there's not a person who survived COVID, the pandemic, with a story that'll break your heart. Yeah. People couldn't go to funerals of loved ones. People couldn't have someone in there they were giving birth. People, no one got out of it without having something really bad happen to them. So I just try with that all the time. And this job is great for that, because it's anytime you start having a pity party and oh, poor me, going wrong for me, listen to the stories that are running on the 6 p.m. news about how people fronting up after hardship and showing all this resilience, and look for the helpers, as they always say, and the way we've rallied. I don't think I could have handled all of this as well as I have if I felt like it was just happening to me. But you just look and you're I'm not going to complain too loudly, because everyone else has got something to complain about too.
Yeah, I think it's been one of those things that's really bonded all of us, as horrible and sad and depressing as it is. We're doing it together. So it has actually made the community stronger in a strange way. But I wanted to pick up on something you mentioned a moment ago, that being in America, the experience of I would say, a level of burnout, right, in the job that you were doing. I feel like so many people who work in media or any kind of high performing sort of job, it feels like you almost can't have success in some of those industries or roles without having had some kind of burnout experience. Do you feel like that's true? Can you be a successful media journalist and never face a burnout season?
I don't know, because a lot of us are like type A personalities and we're all kind of like, none of us like getting beaten, so we're all worst enemies. I mean, I don't know. It's a good question. I don't think I could have kept on at that rate. Like, I had to, my body was like, you need to like calm down, and I had to do a total rethink. I went to like this retreat. I learned about meditation. I developed a meditation practice, and just really about, and I think, yes, I did kind of go there, and now I'm just so much calmer. Like, and also what's happening, Mum, like, literally, this sounds pretty like glib, but now if there's a problem, like, my first question in my head is someone going to die if this isn't resolved, or out of this situation? And it's a real, just bring it back all into perspective. No, someone's not going to die. My boss will get mad at me, or this will happen, so how do we fix it and stay calm? And I just think that, but in answer to your question, I don't know. I mean, and you never know with people, do you? Some people just handle. I don't think anyone would have thought that I got burnt out, but it's, but I don't know, because I don't think anyone would have picked it up. I just kept going. I was like one of those rabbits with the batteries, you know, energized battery, just kept going. And it was only really when Mum got really sick that it all kind of, the wheels fell off, when it was just like, oh, I've got to prioritize this. But I don't know. And there is the other good thing about the media. I mean, I don't know if it was the time that I came through when I was really lucky, but I've worked for the same network since my first job. I've come through the ranks, was in Brisbane 7. Like, half the people I work with started out there as well. There is a camaraderie that you have, and you kind of look out for each other. And there are people like Emma Dallimore, who's out 2IC in here. She was a correspondent over in LA while I was there. Like, you know, I think we kind of look out for each other. We've had a lot of shared experiences. So when you see someone sort of at a tipping point, then you kind of go, oh, I've seen this. I had that look in my eyes for a while there, you know. But I mean, I think, like I said, I don't want to make it sound like we're doing it tougher than everyone else, because I do think that I think it's kind of just where we're at the moment, isn't it? And we're all 24/7 on our phones, and I assume people who are running corporations or have high level jobs in any organization have probably been there, because no one can say, no, I'm not available, I'm having time, because, you know, we're all on email and phones. And, I don't know, our bosses are doing it. Like, it's not just you know, we're all doing it, and we all need to like unplug, but it's a bit.
Yeah, I think thankfully at least people are starting to be a little bit more considerate of people's need to unplug, like that, making it okay to say, I'm not available right now, or I'll get back to you in a minute. We've started to make that kind of all right, at least, which is good. But I wanted to ask you, I mean, your time in the States, you were there for quite a few years. How does the American media environment differ from the Australian one? Because I think as an Australian audience, we like to think that our media is a bit more truthful, maybe a bit more pure. There's less agenda to it compared to the American side of things. But is that true, do you think?
I think that the network news, like if you've got NBC, the big names people who know, NBC, ABC, I think they're quite similar to us. I think they have the same ethics as us. I think they try and be fair and balanced. I think the difference is, although having said that, I think our quality of news, and I might sound biased, but our quality of news, you know, we, you know, bat above our average for the size of our organizations, and the quality of the news we deliver is as good as the US networks' main shows. They have like local bulletins and statewide bulletins that go on earlier that completely underfunded, and like we just way above those. But I think that considering the amount of money that is in the American media, we bat way above our average in terms of the quality of our broadcasts here in Australia. I think the main difference with Americans, like I said, I think they're honest and truthful and balanced by and large. The problem, or not the problem, but the polarization is with Fox News and CNN. And obviously we've got Sky and we've got stuff here on the cables, but not that many people watch it. Whereas Fox News and CNN is on every airport, every bar you go into, every restaurant almost. And they have now, there's such a big divide between that really conservative voice. But to be fair, even Fox News, their news bulletins are pretty balanced. It's just the talking heads. They've got a very conservative side to them. Whereas CNN has sort of, I think, made themselves the anti-Trump voice to balance that. But then you've got this big, it's just polarized America more than it had to be. And because the very nature of those channels is just talking heads, a lot of them, because that's cheap, easier to fill hours and hours of content rather than like really thoughtful packaged up stuff. They still do that, don't get me wrong. I don't want to, nothing's like black or white. Like there are still wonderful pieces of journalism you'll see on both CNN and Fox, but generally I think the divide that you see and the polarization and the different ways of seeing things is more on that cable kind of thing. And it's not even say that either of them are lying. It's just like anything. People who have got a conservative bent just see things differently, and people who are, you know, on the other side of the spectrum, they see things sorry.
That's all right.
Too much, my battery's dying. They just see things differently. I'm not saying that they're necessarily lying, but they're just putting one opinion out there, and that's dangerous when you're talking constantly. And it's better to have a varied diet of opinions so you can make your own and be well informed. That's my opinion.
And while you were over there, one of the big events you got to be part of was the inauguration of President Barack Obama. You got to cover that. When you look back on an occasion like that, how do you feel? Like, are you aware of the moment of history that you're standing in, or are you just there doing your job and then, like you've said before, you process everything afterwards?
No, there's some pretty special moments like that. And even when you are just doing your job and you're just like, oh God, I got to get this, I got to get that. But generally speaking, you're still kind of aware. Like you do feel like, it's so cliche, but like we're at the front seat of history, and it does feel like that. And everything I got to do, like standing in the Oval Office, they don't let you take selfies or photos, but I remember taking a photo of my shoes standing on the carpet in the Oval Office, just so I'm like, I've got to have something at this. But yeah, so I do think I feel incredible. Like, as hard as I worked, as burnout as I may have got, I would never take back the time I spent over there. Like, yeah, I worked hard, but I got the most amazing experiences. I just saw parts of the world I would never see. So it is a very fortunate, lucky position that we are in, and I'll always be grateful for it.
What have been some of your most significant, most memorable moments up till now?
It's really, like, I remember my first job as a Lismore Prime reporter. I did a story, this Indigenous art group had got all this stuff stolen and everything like that, and I went down there and it wasn't getting any coverage, and I went down there and I met with them and they shared their stories, and anyway we ended up getting all this money coming in and people returning all their stuff, and it was like the first time I was like, oh, this is how we can actually, you know, this was my first story where I did a story on something and told a story that needed to be told, and oh look, they get back their stuff. And it was, so that was, I was like, well, this could actually help people. I can actually help people. So that was really special. But I think, you know, the Cyclone Larry, I went up there when I was a young reporter, and that was, that really impacted me. And that was pretty profound. That was the first time I really covered something that I could see like widespread devastation, how it hurt people. In the US, I think I covered the Chile miners, that they were trapped down in for months, and it was the first time Seven had done proper rolling coverage with their local talent as opposed to just crossing to our international partners. And they were like, Sunrise was like, oh, we'll just do a quick 3-minute cross, and like I think like 7 hours later or something, I was still talking. It was, oh my God. And it was professionally, if someone had told me we're going to get you to do this, I probably would have said, I don't think I should go, you should send someone. I've not done that before. But then you just get thrown in something, and then also any fear or nerves or whatever kind of gets overtaken by, if you open your heart to the people you're actually reporting on. If ever I feel nervous, when you still do, and big important things that, you know, people will be looking at, I just like take a breath and I'm like, this is not about me. It doesn't matter what me It doesn't even matter if I stuff up and say the wrong thing on the auto cue. This is about the 33 miners who are trapped down in that thing. This is about their wives that are terrified that they're not going to see them again. This is about people living out here in the middle of the desert for 40 days or whatever because they just care so much. And once you open your heart and remember who the story is actually about, all the other stuff goes away, and then you just focus on that. You just need to cover the story for the people that count, and they're the people that count. The people out and the people who are watching that you're trying to inform, they're the only thing that matters. All the other stuff is just window dressing. So Billy Miner's one was big, and then the Boston bombings was obviously really quite full on, but I've had fun things. I got to go on the red carpet for the Oscars and dress up and do all that stuff. Had with Prince Harry when he was doing a royal tour of Canada. So like I was under the balcony when William and Kate kissed, you know, like doing all of our coverage over there. So I've been to Olympics. I've done fun stuff and also pretty traumatic stuff, but it's all been pretty eventful. Yeah.
And it all kind of sits somewhere different in the spectrum of cool things that you've got to do and significant stuff as well. But as we wrap it up, Angela, I want to ask you a question that I ask many of our guests, and that is just, what does it mean to you to live an undistracted life? Because on this podcast, we talk about how you can build your life around the things that matter to you, the things you find purpose in. For you, what would it mean to be living fully focused, undistracted in pursuit of those things?
Well, this kind of comes back to what I was saying before, which sounds a bit dramatic, but now, like, because so much noise can happen, it can happen out here, like with other people, but it can happen in my own head. I'm like think too much, and it's sort of like, how does this serve me? Like letting this take up space in my head. Is anyone going to die as a result of this? Like, let's take it back to the most essential. How does this serve me? If I get upset and hurt by other people, my mantra is everyone's just doing the best they can. And some people think that's a weak thing to tell yourself. If someone's horrible to you or done something wrong, no, don't let them off like that, because they deserve you to be an asshole back, whatever. But I'm like, you know what? Everyone's just doing the best they can. If that's the best they can manage as a person, that's fine with me. It lets everything wash off me, because I'm like, I'm not taking their issues or nastiness or whatever on board. I'm really focusing on the people I love. I don't have I'm not one of these people that has hundreds of friends. Like, I've got a good core group. I'm friendly to everyone, but like, I use my time wisely. I always make sure I self-care, like my time at the beach, even looking after my mum, who's like got this terminal cancer. I don't know how long she's, whatever. I don't mean whatever, that sounds flippant, but I just mean, I know the title, but even with that, I'm like, I'm still spending half an hour in the morning going to the ocean and having that me time, because if I don't do the oxygen mask first, then I can't be hers. Then I go and visit her, and I've got everything to give her. And friends who get upset if I haven't been able to catch up or go out drinking with them or whatever, I'm like, I don't have time for that. Like, I just focus on the people I care about, being the best human I can be, and just really like, don't worry about what the people say. And I love this Brené Brown. I read a lot of Brené Brown. I listen to her, and she often quotes this, you know, person in the arena thing. Like, if in the arena getting your ass kicked, then I do not care what you think. If you're in the cheap seats watching on while I'm down here living my best life, being vulnerable, being nice to people, working hard, looking after the people I love, if you got any criticism and you're not down here doing the same thing, then I hear it. I just don't hear it. And that's changed my life. I had the like quote up on my wall, so I remember it all the time, because you just got to stop listening to all the noise and just focus on the people that you care about.